Got it. All right. Since we have so many veteran chairs, we want to really, as Sally said, focus on the nuances or the issues that have come up at reading teams or at commission that have been moments when we've looked at each other and said, oh, that's a chair training issue. Oh, we need to focus a little more on that. And so what has happened since the last chair training is that the visiting committee manual has been updated with some very specific pages for chairs. So if you have that manual with you, I'm going to be referring to pages 9 through 12. But in general, you know, as a chairperson, you are the keeper of the process. You are the protector of the integrity of what we do. You've been on several teams, or you wouldn't have been identified as chair potential. So you've had experience with different types of leadership on a chair, from a chair. You've had experience with different team dynamics, and you have ideas in your own mind about what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And those are all good tools to have in your toolkit when you approach a school. But know that as a chair, you really are the keeper of the process. And it is your responsibility to make sure that things happen. Sometimes you don't get to do the fun things. You don't get to visit all the classrooms. You don't get to be at the school, the student council meeting sometimes, which is the most fun of all. Because issues are coming up that you have to journey with the principal and the pastor, even though that's not your role, but sometimes you get involved in that. You have to make sure that the homework was done by the team, and if they didn't do their homework, that puts more work on you, because by 3 o'clock on day 3, you've got to be done. You've got to be done. And even though we say, yes, you can take the document back with you to polish or clean up those little typos and things, within a week or less, you're supposed to have the final docs to the commissioner and back to the school. And it's just so much easier to leave everything at 3 o'clock that day. So keeper of the process, keep that in mind as we go through these slides, that is truly your duty, your obligation, and your privilege to journey with this. Some of the things that came up that we wanted to emphasize with you as we look at those pages 9 through 12, you are the communicator. And a lot of schools, principals have told us that they never heard from their chair until right before the pre-visit. They even had trouble connecting with the chair to set a pre-visit date. So communication, if you look at that very first column, or first set of bullets on page 9, that was key. When this little ad hoc committee met to say, what are those chair responsibilities that are not coming through? It was communication was the first thing that committee put on there. And communication way before. So I hope that you've already had an opportunity to talk to the school that you're visiting. Now, it's not always easy. And if you're a principal and that principal it has a busy time, communication is a challenge, but it's so important. Just to let them know you're on the face of the earth. You exist, and there's an opportunity for them to communicate with you and talk to you and ask questions. That there's another body out there besides the commissioner that they can run a few things by. So communication is very key. The pre-visit, totally optional, but it's nice to put a face to a name and to stop in and months before. And this is who I am, I just want to get a sense of the campus as I'm talking to you on the phone or as I'm reading your drafts. But if you're chairing in Hawaii, a pre-visit probably isn't going to work. I'm chairing in New Mexico this year, not working. We're not, you know, because it's an expense for the school. Now, most of us, if it's driving distance, that's fabulous. But, or if you're, like some people chair more than one school a year, you're in the area, you might want to stop in. But it is delightful, and it is very comforting for the school. Very comforting for the school to put that face to the chair's name. And to know that you're just a human body like everybody else. We're so nervous, especially new teachers, because they're being evaluated. And so the pre-visit is just wonderful. Also, all the things that you need. It's so nice if that school knows ahead of time that you're still the paper shredder person, or you still want the different, whether it's coffee or tea or root beer, whatever it is that you need, so they get a sense way ahead of what are the things that are going to make this team very comfortable, and what are the expectations of this chair for working with my school. Another thing that needs to happen sometime between the announcement of who the chair is and the actual pre-visit is some sense of timeliness. Some principals don't have a clue that you need to see the pastor. They don't, well, they haven't read their manual, but they don't understand that they need to arrange these meetings, that you don't arrange them. You might say, I'd like to meet the pastor on day one and the parents on day one. But if you don't indicate that, they might arrange it for the afternoon of day two. Oh, not good. What are you doing in the afternoon of day two? Yes, you're writing, you're composing, you're drafting, you're editing, and you're really in that mode. And to break that mode is very difficult for the team. So it's important for the principal to understand the rhythm, and it all happens because of communication. So pre-visit, if you can. I've never done one. Well, I did two. I did one at the high school level, but never elementary. But pre-visit, but lots of communication beforehand. What are some other things that happen in the pre-visit time from veteran chairs? Some other things that you need to communicate about.
Well, I work in the Archdiocese of Seattle, and a lot of their schools are spread out over hundreds of miles.
Yes, they are.
So it's best to kind of confirm with the principal if they're able to provide accommodations for any of the team members, because when our team is assigned, then I can go back to the commissioner and say, this isn't going to work for the school, and just know what your team's requirements will be and work with the principal in advance so there are no surprises.
And then you have a sense of the school's budget, because until you get the book, you have no sense of that. So yeah, absolutely.
Also logistically, and I'm going to piggyback on Seattle, finding out whether they're going to have a full day on that Thursday or whether they're going to have a minimum day. Now, we kind of developed our process so we can do a visit in 2.5 days. I mean, we're sure can, but we always tell the school that depending on the team and when they're finished, they give them a day that they need to stay until the team's ready. But another thing is distance from the airport. And for instance, here in Seattle, I had a 6:05 flight because that was the last Southwest flight they could get into Orange County. And we didn't get to work at 2 for a pre-visit. So God was good. He put wings on us. We didn't fly over the traffic, but we did make it. But that's a consideration allocation of the school. I'm trying to figure out, I'm still not quite sure where my school is at in Albuquerque.
And I'm sharing in Santa Fe, and I think I have to come in on Sunday night for a pre-visit because I can get in at 12:05 and then I can leave at 4. Well, that's not a long time for a, and the school's an hour from the airport, so Steve.
One of the things that you get to visit the school, it really is good to meet with the faculty for at least 20, 30 minutes. They have a lot of concerns, put their minds at ease what you're really there to do. There's always questions about evidence, what evidence are you going to be looking for.
That's a really good point. Evidence is an enigma for some of them. Some teachers want to put out absolutely every assignment they've given for a whole year from every child. And they don't understand that you really want to see the unique things that bring curriculum alive at their school. Because we all have similar textbooks. We all have similar spelling assignments. They don't need everything out there, but they need those projects, those special assignments, those rubrics that make the curriculum come alive there, that are unique to them. Field trip formats that we can do in the desert in the Palm Springs area can't be done here in Orange. So there's different opportunities, different guest speakers, different connections. And so that's what you want them to understand. That's the evidence that, what is it that really makes this school special and unique and shows student growth. Shows student growth.
It's also very important to talk with the commissioner of the diocese, because each diocese is a little bit unique in relationship to their process and procedures. So, what about in-depth studies? How do you handle in-depth studies within the diocese? Also, how is the school doing with their annual reports? Are they consistent with their annual reports? All of those things are important pieces of information to know. But more, LA is different than Orange. San Bernardino is different than San Diego. So it's really important to talk to the commissioner and just get a sense of what is different about your diocese. Also going back, remember for the veteran chairs that they used to have file boxes of evidence. Please do not encourage the file boxes of evidence. Oftentimes what would happen is 2 weeks before, for 2 weeks before the visit, the teachers would do nothing but collect all of the data of student work. And then even on the last day, teachers would walk into the workroom, collect the boxes, and who knows where they went. I hesitate to guess. But basically, we want to see teaching, we want to see good curriculum, we don't want to see good teaching methodology. We want the teachers to show us their best teaching. We used to say, just show us what you do every day, but don't show movies. And now we're saying, we want to see what you really can do in a classroom, because this is where the student learning takes place.
And another piece to encourage your principal is to watch what the teachers are planning for that time period. I was at a fabulous school this last year, but my team was very uncomfortable with the fact that there were guest speakers in the classroom, so they were not seeing student engagement, they were not seeing interaction with the teacher. And then in the computer lab, which they made a big deal about in their book, actually it was the technology center, it wasn't the computer lab, and they had all these FOSS science equipment things in there, and they had all something else that was really fabulous. We didn't get to see any of it because they were testing. They were doing map testing. And we couldn't even go in because they were testing. So you please alert your principals to check what is scheduled. And that was like, well, this is our window for testing. Well, then they shouldn't have scheduled the visit here. Oh, well, a year and a half ago, we didn't think about that. You got to think about that, because even though everything worked out in the end to be in the school's best interest, the team, there was just that edge as they were writing because they were irritated. There was just that edge. So communication with the school, communication with your team. Now hopefully soon you'll get the members of your team and you'll be able to communicate with them. There's nothing more uncomfortable for brand new team members than to come to team training and we say, and of course you've heard from your team by now, and or your chair by now, and they get really nervous. Oh, did they forget me? I haven't heard anything. Even if you just send each of them an email that says, welcome to our team, you'll hear from me next month. Just something so they know, because they've got their letters from us, hopefully from the commissioners, and if you have a fall visit, please communicate with your team. But spring visits, anytime between now and Christmas, you should get your team, or right after Christmas, you should get the names of your team. And so that you can just say, this is who I am, this is how you can connect with me, but I'll get back with you after Christmas a little more formally. And then you send them a welcome letter. And please make sure that the commissioner gets a copy of your letter, so the commissioner knows that you're communicating with them and what you said. And sometimes the commissioner thinks that things are happening at 1 o'clock and you've had to change things to 10 o'clock. And we would like to know that. We would like, because we like to try to be there at pre-visits, right? I don't know, Erin, you have so many, but if you're able to be at a pre-visit, no. Julie, are you try and be at pre-visits? I know Sally, you try and be at pre-visits. Or we have a sub that goes for us if possible. I know Greg has been at pre-visits, and I'm sure John goes occasionally. But we know that your travel is in your hands. We can't control that. And if your flight, you had to make a different flight arrangement, or you had to make different travel arrangements, or you have to drive through Corona, and you don't want to start or be on the road at 4 o'clock, let the commissioner know so that we have the correct times. Because what tradition was, the pre-visit was from 1 to 4. Well, that has gone way out the window based on traffic and travel. But we want to be there for you. We want to be there to support you. We want to be there to support the school. I know one time I had to leave a pre-visit early. And so I welcomed the team and then I turned it over to the chair and I had to leave. The teachers were devastated that I wasn't there for when they met the team, to introduce the team and make them feel like they had support. Did you abandon us? Well, no. So make sure that communication is happening with your team members and with the commissioner. So communication is key. You can read those bullets, but there's a lot of areas where communication is broken down. And we hear it from the school principals, we hear it from their commissioners when we come to the reading team meetings.
Also, in relationship to communication, in relationship to the actual visit, I usually touch base with the principal at least 2 to 3 times a day, in relationship to just a private conversation, in relationship to talking about our direction, and especially beginning to talk on the second day about some of our findings, so that nothing is a surprise when they get that preliminary report on the 3rd day. You want things to move as smoothly as possible, and you don't want them to read it in print on that 3rd day preliminary reading, something that they're saying, oh my gosh. So meeting with the principal is really important throughout the visit.
And not all chairs understand that. We've had chairs where they said, well, you've done your work, so we want to see how it's lived out in the school. We're not going to talk to you till day 3. Oh, my gosh. And I speak from experience because I had a school that had a horrible visit, a horrible experience. And they really felt like the chair, the principal felt like the chair absolutely ignored him. And then, of course, felt like the chair was out to get him. And that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to look at their story, to verify it with their reality, and then to see if they match, and then help them massage or evaluate their action plan to see if this is the right direction for them to go. And we don't want people to feel like they're being watched. Or it is evaluative, and there's a fine line, a real balance that you have to walk with that. But the self-study, they've lived it. We're only there for a day and a half gathering evidence before we're writing. You have to be open to the possibility that you might not have seen everything. Sally.
And one of my team members, I was on a pre-visit the other day, and she kind of looked at me rather strangely, and she said, well, I heard that our role is just to verify the self-study, and that's it. And I said, well, that is true. We need to verify the self-study. What they are doing is actually what they wrote. That's important. But we are in an evaluative mode, okay? No longer are we going to hand stamp approval of a school just because they wrote a good self-study, okay? We're here to support that school in every single way we possibly can. Also, you're judging the school reality. You're not necessarily judging the school's self-study, because schools, I have seen some pretty bad self-studies, and we have had to work really hard those 3 days to find the information we needed, but the school was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That is more often the case. Their writing skills are less than stellar.
So you're looking at the reality of the school and not just the self-study. The self-study is just a big piece of evidence.
Another piece of communication is when you make your assignments, your writing assignments. Some chairs like to tell everybody, read everything and send me bullet points, and I'll put the draft together. Other chairs want to assign one main person and one support person to each section of the document and give them some kind of guidance. Work very hard to look at the sheets they send, their desirability sheets. I try to make sure that when I look at what they've signed up for, that somebody wants to do data analysis on each team, and somebody wants to do resource management on each team. But not everybody wants to do curriculum, or not everybody wants to do support for student spiritual, academic, and personal growth, because that's the fun one. But work real hard to honor that. And I don't know how this happens, but every once in a while you'll get a non-Catholic person who gets assigned to Catholic identity. Now it works as long as somebody else is there to make sure they're writing correctly. But we have a lot of people we want formed, a lot of people we want, this is the best professional development a teacher can do, you know that. And we want a lot of people to have that experience, but just watch carefully, part of that communication piece, watch where you're placing them, because they took the time to check off what they wanted to do. So please take the time to look at it when you make your assignments. And that's always a matrix puzzle to try and fill that out.
Yeah, logistically, there's 3 different tools that are out there now for collaborative writing, because you do want to have a tool that everyone can get into right after the pre-visit up to the visit to do some writing so that you can just pull it off and have a draft at the visit. A tool that chairs started out with is Whiteboard, and you find Whiteboard on the WCEA website. Google Docs is another one that many schools are familiar with, teams are familiar with. I find that sometimes when I take it off Google Docs, the formatting is a little weird. The third one that I'm using this year that seems to be working pretty well is Dropbox. I just invite people into a file that has the visiting committee report in Dropbox, and they can edit and whatever, or they can write. And then when we get to the visit, I make sure that there's internet access so we can access it at the visit, and then we just pull everything off. So there are 3.
There's one more that I came across of, it's called OneDrive, and you can do all of your Word documents in the cloud, and you can actually create them from the OneDrive, and it works very similar to Google Docs, where if you're all on the document at one time, you can see each other making the edits. So that one's better because the formatting is more consistent with.
Is it free?
It's free.
How do you spell it?
OneDrive.
It's part of,
OneDrive, yeah.
Part of the Word package.
Part of Word?
It's all part of the Word package. Yes, it's all part of that, and especially if you update Word and the whole package, or Office, and you update all that, OneDrive will come with it, and it's right there. It's really a very interesting tool to use if everybody has access to it.
Right. But that's the key of everybody has.
It's still so new to the whole Office product. They may not all still have access to it, but it's a really great tool.
Right, for
I use
formatting
it too.
purposes.
Yes, and it does format really well based on Google, which is exactly what I have found. I love Google, but I have found that transferring it over
Yeah, it's not-
takes time to get it to look the way I want. So it looks one way in Docs, it looks another.
Microsoft 10?
Yes, so Microsoft 10, yes, or Office 365, all those things now, all have OneDrive attached to it. So, but you have to have that, that's the only thing I would worry about.
Whiteboard, W-R-I-T-E. Whiteboard. And I'm old school, I just like them to send it to me Word by email. And I cut and paste. But in return for that, I do try and make sure that before the visit, on maybe the Friday before the visit, I send them the draft. So they have an opportunity to look and see what everybody else was saying. And that's a nice, leave that with them because you can't change any content. And we have paranoid people out there who think, oh, she's taking it back and she's going to change everything. Even team members, if your team is a little contentious, hopefully you don't have one of those, but it's been known to happen, this is where they're at. And then we have an obligation to help them understand where they're going with good strategies, meaningful strategies that are going to help them achieve those goals. And did they convince us that they can accomplish this? You know, if they want a library and they aren't making payroll, it's probably not a good goal.
And a library is not a critical goal.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. The physical building of a library is not a critical goal. I mean, yes, it will enhance student learning in an indirect manner, but it's actually, you have to have the direct correlation between the student and the goal and how that is going to impact. They have to be measurable.
There's one of these slides that, okay. Notice the bottom bullet here in bold. You're going to have an opportunity to affirm the school's direction where they're going or guide them differently. What is your understanding of option A and option B? Language that clearly expressed so they're not guessing. But we all have sat in a meeting where somebody has got a pen and they're underlining all the effectives, highly effective. They've all done it, we've done it, right? So find, if you're not gonna use that language, and for reading teams, it's really boring, it is. It's really boring to read that same sentence in every
What is
section.
the best way to do it? Do we just come outright and say what it is, or should we try and kind of massage it in a?
Well, there's language that tells them what it is, but I would mix it up. I would use highly effective and effective occasionally, but sometimes when you say permeates, that's pretty high, or of significant quality. They know what that means. Or limited amount, minimal interaction. Okay, they pretty much get that. Of course, they don't know whether you're choosing somewhat or ineffective.
Right.
But there's very specific words that, when you're talking about a vibrant Catholic environment, if they don't know that's highly, then you're wrong. If you don't give them a highly on the justification statement, you've done something wrong. We're way past break. So we'll talk a little about this more. We're going to do a special section on data analysis, a little piece of table work, and some table work with an action plan. So we'll have lots of opportunity the rest of the day to look at those things. But share responsibilities. I think you got it, and ask your veterans all around you. Shareholders. That other governing authority expectations, that's a hard one for people to relate to and understand. But pastors have specific expectations for their schools. The school has a preschool. You're answerable to Title 22 guidelines. You're answerable to community care licensing. Sometimes there's civic ordinances that have to be followed that you think, why do they have this kind of traffic pattern? This doesn't make any sense. But that communication piece, they're not just writing that mission philosophy to be in the book.
Could that also be directives from the diocesan office?
The diocese made me do it.
Right. No, exactly.
Well,
But I think that, certain, they have standards, and that you are constantly meeting those standards are moving forward when they're trying to move you forward as well.
And even the cycle for in-depth studies is different from diocese to diocese, and that's a governing authority expectation. So that's good to focus on. This one is so hard because they don't focus on structures. They get caught in the objective of that sentence, not the subject. High achievement. No, structures. What is your school board? What is your governing level within your community? What student council, PTG, your pastor-school relationship? Are you a parish school, a diocesan school? Really, if you get drafts from them, really help them focus on structures. And then somebody told them that the more times you write something, the better support you might have for it to become a goal. So in every section, if they want to work on math, they put math in everywhere because math doesn't quite flow from structures. And so that's a tough one for them to look at. Now, we already did data analysis, so we won't look at that one again. SLEs and curriculum standards. This turns out to be one of the shortest sections of the document because everybody as educators is familiar with educational standards, so we don't have to expand them and talk them to death. And what the difference between what the standards are in E and the F, how they're shared, instructional methodology, are difficult to separate. In fact, I almost wish the two of them were smashed together. And so that we didn't have to worry so much about keeping them separate. But this is really an opportunity for them to talk about whether they teach life science, earth science, and physical science separately, or if they teach them as one, if they do integrated math or algebra. That's the what that they're teaching. But we get uncomfortable with this because this is who we are, sharing curriculum. This should be long. No, it's one of the shortest sections in the document.
This is the longest section. How we deliver it. How we deliver it is what makes each of our schools unique and special. And that academic freedom that we give the teachers with, tightly reined. I don't know, is that an oxymoron? Tightly reined academic freedom? But that is really the longer section because that's what we do best. Each teacher sharing that information in special and unique ways. This is where the technology piece really comes in and how that has impacted instructional methodology. And then this is a longer section because, again, we meet the needs of the whole child, so all those extras that we do. And this, I cringe when people forget to talk about serious extras like disaster planning or even the scoliosis, vision, dental, hearing screening. Those are all some of the things that belong in G, and people miss that because they talk about altar serving and flag football and student council. And student council gets, they get twice. They're a structure, but they're also that leadership formation, so they get to be talked about twice. And then the biggest part here is transparency. Our principals are so afraid to be wrong in finances that they don't want anybody else to look at those reports. And when you have a school in crisis, if the community is not aware, there's no helping them. And by the time some principals share their concerns with the community, they're on the short end of being closed. So what you're looking for in this section is really transparency. Does the pastor know what's going on? Does the school board know what's going on? Does the parent community at least see that annual report? Is it published in the bulletin? I don't know about your CFO, but my CFO, if everybody doesn't publish that report in the bulletin every year by November 30th, we get the letter. So now, the design and alignment of the action plan. If you're a veteran chair, I know you've experienced this, where you are reading the document, you have a sense, okay, they're really going to be focused on math. And you get to the end and they're writing something about language arts. Now, again, as commissioners, hopefully we've seen these drafts, so we're able to ask the question, where the heck did that come from? But sometimes we don't ever get this section. They send us every part of 3, and they run out of steam when it comes to 4, and we don't get this section. They are supposed to, with simple bullets, all of their accomplishments, a simple bulleted list. A lot of them forget to delete the directions, so that list gets longer and longer. They don't need to do them by category or by chapter, but they do. When you have 8 sections plus your in-depth, there could be as many as 45 bullets. Your job is to synthesize those down to 8. Because as a visiting committee, you're supposed to take the 8 strongest. But I've mastered the art of taking all 45 and getting them into 8. That means each one is a little bit long, but they're there. Because they thought all of those were important, and I want to honor that. Anybody else? How do you get that synthesis done, Sally?
And actually, there may be something that they didn't mention that, is really wow. Sometimes with the 45, they're just little tiny things, like having a retreat. Well, that's not a major accomplishment, so you might put it in a little broader context in relationship to faith formation.
Well, and there is a way to, you categorize them. Okay, there's 8 categories. So if I can do one bullet for each category, maybe I can get all of them in. And the in-depth can be thrown into the correct, I know. Well, like I said, they're long. The bullets are long. But
to
Yes.
observe and to visit, and sometimes they sell themselves short in the self-study. And so when our committee first meets, I would say, you know, we're looking for the 8 highlights, and it might be what you observe. And so every day we kind of compile a list, and then at the end, when we're writing those highlight or those, you know, 8 most glaring strengths, we look at the self-study and our list and kind of dovetail those two.
And they love to see sentences like, the visiting committee also observed, or the visiting committee was very impressed with, or the visiting committee received much clarification about this, because then you're not just regurgitating what they wrote. That's the saddest part of a great visit. When they look at you and said, but we said that. And yet those are the schools who probably get 12 highly effectives because they did say it and they said it well. But it is wonderful for you to put in the document. The visiting committee noticed. The visiting committee took part in. The visiting committee was able to experience. Those are really wonderful reflections, and it gives them a sense that you really did pay attention when you were there. Angie.
I like to have all the shareholders be able to see themselves in the 8 that are listed.
There you go.
I really like to do that, and I'd like to have those written like a marketing thing, so they can pick it up and put it up.
List of the critical goals. Now, there's a missing bullet here because they are supposed to do exactly with the goals what they do with the accomplishments. They're supposed to list all 27. 1 to 3, 9 sections, so maximum of 27. Some people can't count, but and then you don't touch those goals. Their goals are their goals. And then they choose 5. Now, sometimes those 5 are those 27 smashed together in different ways, but they write a good goal for 5 areas, and they write a paragraph explaining and justifying why that goal is, keyword, critical. Critical meaning the school will suffer, the students will suffer if this doesn't happen. Now, and then they add the 6th goal for the in-depth study, which seldom is critical if the in-depth happens to be social studies or PE or fine arts. But it could, math and language arts could be critical because the students would suffer if that doesn't happen. But we're on a cycle. And if the in-depth study happens to be one that's not critical, that it's a 6th one. They have to, and it is the job of the leadership team to prioritize the 5 and pick the 2 they really want to flesh out an action plan for. There's nothing that lessens the other 3 because they're all called critical. And it means that they're probably going to work on them in tandem with the 2, but they're only fleshing out 2 into an action plan, plus the in-depth. Or unless you're sharing in Fresno, where they might not do the in-depth. That was the first time I'd heard of a diocese not doing that, but that's the communication with the commissioners that gave you that piece of information. Then you're going to write your narrative based on those critical goals. Did they identify the 5 best ones? And sometimes there's 2 that sound so familiar that they really could have put those 2 together and added a different one. And that's when you might be using option A or B in this list of 5. If you use option B just to adjust the list, it's probably not as critical as if you use option B to replace an action plan item. Does it address the critical goals that support high achievement for all students? I don't think anybody's writing about re-roofing or getting new air conditioning anymore, but it took a while for schools to let go of the physical plant. But we're 8 years into this now, 9 years into this new format, so I think everybody's really focused on those items that really impact student achievement. And then these last 3 bullets are the areas we're going to focus on in this little activity that Sally's got going for us. Does the action plan identify specific strategies and activities? This was where I was lapsing into conversation earlier. Does the action plan identify implementation of these strategies? Does the action plan include specific assessments to monitor growth in student learning? There's something about a chart with boxes that people get boxed in. Well, the space is only this big, so that's all I can write. All of those boxes expand as you type. And they need to realize that each one of those boxes is important. I talked a little bit about, I started to talk about resources. A lot of people get caught up in resources being dollars. It is important, if the word critical has any meaning at all, it's important enough for them to do some research on what this strategy will cost. If they're talking about professional development, they should do a little bit of research, or at least give themselves a budget limit. You know, first year up to $5,000, second year $2,500. They should at least be treated as important enough to have a dollar figure, if it requires a dollar figure. But there's other resources out there. Are they using the local school district resources that are available to them? Are they using community resources that are available to them? Did they even think beyond the budget? And then I started to talk about baseline data. Sometimes baseline data has nothing to do with the test score. Most times it has nothing to do with the test score. Again, let me go to professional development. If you want to increase the opportunities in professional development for differentiated instruction, the baseline might be we don't have any. It doesn't have to be a test score. The baseline is, if we're going to increase or add professional development, it's because the baseline is we don't have any. We've not focused on DI. All of our focus the last few years has been on curriculum mapping, which we don't do anymore because we adopted Plan Book. You know, so don't, if you have an opportunity to look at the action plan before it goes to print, help the school understand that there's many things that can go in those boxes. It's just not one answer each time. And then the strategies need to be, well, the goals need to be broad. Strategies are a little more specific. And then if there's a strategy 1, there should be a strategy 2. And if there's an activity 1, there should be activity 2 or 3 or 4, because if they can do it in one activity or one strategy, it's not critical. It's got to be something that's going to carry them through 3 years. We used to say 6. Now it's 3. Then you got the 4th year to evaluate, and the 5th year you're writing for the next self-study. So we're much more real, much more focused on the 3 years. Okay, Sally, you want to introduce the activity?